Thanks for your questions. Before we start the Odyssey, let's talk one more time about the legacy of Greece. Thales and his followers are responsible for beginning the scientific perspective. It is not uncommon in human history for a small group of people, or even one person, to have a great impact on the world and change the way we look at things. Thales, his students, and the scientists in ancient Greece who came after him for the next century are responsible for just such a shift in human consciousness. In many Greek statues, the figures are unclothed. The Greeks thought the body was natural and beautiful and meant to be celebrated. We are sometimes surprised at this and maybe even a little uncomfortable. That is because other cultures who thought differently have had an influence on us also. Nude art is something we get used to. Plato was a young man when he was mentored by Socrates. The magic ring is based on a story in Plato. The ring turns someone invisible if it is rotated a certain way. Socrates uses the power of the ring to talk about people's choices. He argues with a man, and he says that eventually, even if no one could see what we were doing, we would do the right thing because our conscience would guide us. Tolkien took the story of the ring and used it for his own purposes. But the basis of the story is there. The snake and the wings on the Hippocratic Oath have ancient roots. The wings represent Hermes. Sometimes doctors had to travel far distances to heal their patients, and Hermes, they believed, acted as their guide, as the god of travelers. The Greeks considered snakes sacred, and the idea of them shedding their skin and growing new skin they used as a model in their minds and a metaphor for healing. The Athenians had a direct democracy. Every citizen was welcome to join in the assembly, debate the course of action for the city, and vote. We have a representative democracy. None of us can go to Congress and debate the laws. We elect people to speak for us, act in both our interest and the interest of the country. We also have a president and a vast bureaucracy. Although the Greeks had some people fulfilling administrative functions, there was no president and no cabinet. In a direct democracy, the citizens rule directly. There were other democratic city-states in ancient Greece that followed the Athenian model and became their allies during the Peloponnesian War. When the Athenians lost the war, the city-states lost their democracies and reverted to other systems of government. Historians write down history based on primary sources, or eyewitness accounts, as well as secondary sources, which are later writings based on contemporary accounts. In the same way that you might write about the American Revolution, having read a book about it that was published this year, the author probably went back and read contemporary accounts of the events and put them into his book. Everything in history does link up in some way. That is why it is so endlessly fascinating. Almost always, the linking up happens in lots of directions at once, like a moving, breathing web of connections. Historians are constantly uncovering and thinking about new ways that the past and the present link up within themselves and to each other. Although the Romans became greatly inspired by Greek culture, they were different people. They were interested in conquering not just the Greeks, but much of the surrounding areas to create their empire. They would align themselves with whatever Greek city-state they could to accomplish their goal. The Greek city-states at the time were divided among themselves, so it was easy for the Romans to conquer them. Alexander, Alexandria, the Romans, the Arabs, the Italian Renaissance, as well as the founders of the United States of America all played a big part in spreading Greek culture across the world and through time. Individual scholars in many other countries played a big part as well. It is common in all these cultures for people to learn Greek and Latin and to study what we call the classics in many of the stories and history and ideas that we learned about this year. You are part of a long line and a great tradition. Spread the word. Latin words are common in medicine, as we now know. Peter also pointed out that Latin words are common in the practice of law. That's part of our inheritance from the Romans. Remember, until very recently, most people understood at least some Greek and Latin. Very educated people like doctors and lawyers understood much more. You know a lot of Greek root words already. Think of your assignment. And if you find a prefix or a suffix, it is often a Greek or a Latin root. Now that you are aware of how this works, you will start finding Greek and Latin root words everywhere. The history of how languages evolve and change and adapt and absorb new words is a fascinating one. It is called etymology. Languages spread like any other part of a culture, food or music or styles of dress, for instance. English, for instance, now has a great influence on world culture due to the importance and the influence of the United States. Many people in different cultures speak at least a little English. At other times in human history, Greek and Latin was sometimes the common language that people spoke across different cultures. A common language is called a lingua franca, from the days when French was the international language. Greek is older than Latin and had a great influence on Latin due to the Romans' great admiration for Greek culture and learning. Latin, in turn, influenced many European languages. Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Italian are all called Romance languages, not because they are the languages of love, but because they come from the language of the Romans. These, in turn, influenced English. In addition to Greek and Latin, English was also influenced by Germanic languages from a different language family. I think some of the Harry Potter spells were based on Greek, but many more of them come from Latin. The modern city of Alexandria, Egypt, is over 10 times the size of the ancient city in population. The ancient city had 400,000 inhabitants. The modern city has over 5 million. But remember, the Earth has a lot more people on it now than 2,300 years ago. Daniel Chester French designed the Lincoln Monument based on the Parthenon, as we know. His house and his studio and the grounds are open to the public. It's about an hour's ride from the school. It's called Chesterwood. Visit it if you can. It's a fun and interesting place. Now, take a moment. Relax. Clear your mind and engage your strong visual imagination. Picture the sights and the sounds and the scenes in the story. We're about to embark on a great adventure. Today, we start the story of the Odyssey. First, the cast of characters. On Ithaca, Odysseus's island, there is Penelope, the wife of Odysseus, who has been waiting for Odysseus' return from Troy for 20 years. There is also his son, Telemachus, who is now 21 years old. There are also suitors in the house, who vie for Penelope's hand in marriage. They are rude and arrogant. Antinous is the most arrogant of the suitors. In Greek, his name means out of his mind. The island of Calypso. Odysseus, the last returning Greek warrior from Troy, is held prisoner by a sea nymph, Calypso, who does not let him escape her island. Now we begin the Odyssey of Homer. The story begins with an invocation, a prayer to the gods. Sing to me, O Muse, of the man of many twists and turns, driven time and again off course after he plundered the hallowed heights of Troy. Many cities he saw, and he learned the minds of the men there. And many pains he suffered heartsick on the open sea, fighting to save his life and bring his comrades home. But he could not save them, hard as he strove. Their recklessness destroyed them all, blind fools. They devoured the cattle of the sun. And Zeus took from them the day of their return. Muse, daughter of Zeus, start wherever you will. Sing for our time too. Lift the great song again. Begin when all the rest had long ago returned, while only one still hungered for wife and home. The nymph Calypso, immortal and beautiful, held him in her sea-hollowed caves. Now all the gods pitied Odysseus, but one, Poseidon, raging rough and cold, he bore the old fighter a grudge, but he had gone off among the sunburnt races. Now in the bright halls of Zeus upon Olympus, all the other gods took their ease. And Zeus spoke, "My, how these mortals take the gods to task. All their problems come from us, we hear. What of their own failings? Greed and folly double the suffering of mankind." "It is true, father," gray-eyed Athena replied, "but still my heart breaks for Odysseus, so long a castaway in the open seas. There is a goddess there, Calypso. She will not let the man go. She tries to turn his mind from home and rocky Ithaca. Are you not moved by this, father?" Now Zeus responded, "My child, how could I forget that lordly man Odysseus? There is no mortal man half as wise. Poseidon bears the old fighter a grudge. He must relent. Father, if it pleases the gods that Odysseus reaches his home again, send Hermes across the sea to the island of Calypso, and tell the nymph with her pretty braids of our intent. I will fly to Ithaca to put courage into his son Telemachus, where he and his mother Penelope sit harassed and beleaguered by a pack of bullying suitors, each seeking Penelope's hand in marriage. They behave like wolves eating up the stores of the great house." Then she bent to tie on her beautiful sandals, golden, that carry her over the waves. Flashing down from Olympus, she went to stand before the manor at the doorsill of the court, taking the shape of Mentor, an old family friend. There was Telemachus, unhappy among the suitors, a boy daydreaming. What if his great father came from the unknown world and drove these men like dead leaves from the house? Telemachus caught sight of the stranger, a goddess disguised as a mortal man, and he rushed to speak to him privately, away from the wildness of the suitors, for he wished to ask news of his father, and he was embarrassed that these men were in his house. "Who are these men? What feast is this? How rude and arrogant they seem. A sensible person would blush to be among them." Now Telemachus responded, "These are suitors for my mother's hand in marriage. They live riotously and eat up the stores of our house. We cannot get rid of them. If my father were here, he would deal out justice to this crowd, but he is dead somewhere on some island, his bones bleached white by the sun. But you, friend, what brings you to our door? Who are you?" Now Athena cast out a tale. "I'm an old family friend. I heard news your father was on his way, so I dropped by to see him. It seems he's been delayed, but never in the world is Odysseus dead, just detained somewhere on the wide sea. He will not be long away from Ithaca. But you, by the looks of you, you must be Odysseus's boy." "Well, they say he is my father. Who knows? I wish I had at least some happy man for a father growing old in our house." "And I wish I saw him standing helmeted in that door," Athena said, holding his spear and his shield, looking the way he did when I first knew him. Telemachus, you're a boy no longer. Rouse yourself. Listen, at daybreak call an assembly. Tell the suitors they must scatter to their own houses, and ask the assembly for a ship and a crew. Go find out news of your father. If you find out he's alive, hold out a year. If not, come home, conduct the proper funeral rites, and give your mother's hand to another. Now I must join my ship. Now Telemachus responded, Friend, you have done me a kindness like a father to a son. I will not forget your counsel. With that Athena left him, as a bird rustles upward in a great clap of hawk's wings, all up and gone. But she put a new spirit in him, a new dream of his father, clearer now, so that he marveled that a god had been his guest. Now godlike, he rejoined the suitors, and they pressed him. Telemachus, Antinous began, who was that? Some god, perhaps? Did he have any news of your father? Now Telemachus spoke. No, that was no god, just a family friend, a traveling man. There was no news of my father, and I would not trust it if it were. But in his heart he knew his visitor was immortal. Then he spoke. At daybreak I will call an assembly. Now you men, go feast somewhere else. Eat up your stores for the night. Then Telemachus retired to his bedroom to contemplate the course that the goddess Athena had laid out for him. When dawn spread her fingertips of rose across a flawless brimming sky, Telemachus called an assembly of the islanders. Athena lavished a sunlit grace on him so he caught the eye of the crowd. My father is lost, and my mother wanted no suitors, but like a pack of bullies they came. My house is being plundered, and where is your shame? In hot anger he cast down the speaker's staff, and his eyes grew bright with tears. A wave of sympathy swept through the crowd. But now Antinous spoke, the most arrogant of the suitors. What high and mighty words, Telemachus! Now listen. Let me tell you what's going on in that house. Let me give you an instance of Penelope's trickery. Wait, she said. I am weaving a shroud, a blanket, a covering for Odysseus's old father, who grows cold and lives in the mountains and comes no more to the town. When the blanket's done, I'll choose one of you to be my new lawfully wedded husband. Well, we feasted in the great hall while she sat smiling at us. Days became weeks, weeks became months. We grew suspicious. We found one of the serving girls who was loyal to us, and she tipped us off. We burst into Penelope's chambers in the middle of the night, and there she was, patiently undoing all her day's weaving. Now, Telemachus, you force your mother to choose one of us to be her new husband, or we will continue to eat up the stores of your great house until you do so. Now Telemachus responded. Antinous, have you no shame at all? How can I force my own mother to leave her own house? If you men had any decency, you would take your dinners elsewhere. Now Zeus launched 2 eagles gliding down from a mountain crest, tearing at each other. They dropped towards the heads of the crowd, a dark foreboding of things to come. Now an old prophet spoke. I wish to open the eyes of the suitors to the black wave towering over them. Odysseus will not be long in returning. Now Antinous, sit down, old man. Tell your omens to children. Odysseus is dead on some island somewhere, and so should you be. Now Telemachus, I'm finished with appeals. Give me a fast ship and let me go find out news from my father. But the assembly was broken up. Nothing was decided. That night Telemachus walked along the shore, and he prayed, O God who came to me yesterday, listen to me and be near me, guide me and help me. And now Athena took the shape of old Mentor, a trusted family friend. Telemachus, you have the pluck and the courage to see this through. Never mind about the suitors. Go back to the house and get some provisions. Meet me at the docks after dark. I will round up a ship and a crew. That night, when Telemachus stepped aboard the ship, Athena stirred them a fair following wind, and the prow of the boat sheared through the night and into the dawn. Now Telemachus arrived at the halls of old King Nestor, the oldest of the Greek warriors who had returned from Troy. Nestor sent Telemachus and one of his sons overland by chariot to Sparta, to the court of Menelaus, the red-haired king. What a brilliant place the mansion of the great king seemed to them, a glitter everywhere, like fiery points of sunlight. How luminous it seemed, gold and amber and silver and ivory, a court to rival the court of Zeus himself. "Come, friends, after we have dined we will hear you your business," the red-haired king spoke. And while they spoke, Helen glided into the room. The eyes of the boys watched her as she swept across the floor in her shimmering gowns, a moving grace like Artemis. She cast a spell over the room so no man's heart could be unhappy that day. And she whispered to Menelaus, "That must be Odysseus' son. How like him he seems in every noble feature." And Telemachus spoke, "Good king, I come for news of my father. My house, my good estates are being ruined by a pack of bullying suitors. Enemies crowd our home. Is there any word or traveler's tale you can tell me about my mighty father?" "My boy, on our journey home, we were blown off course to Egypt, trapped in a bay. A goddess had pity on us, a sea nymph, and she directed me to find the old man of the sea. His name was Proteus. He was a shapeshifter. I followed her instructions closely. When the sun hung high at noon, he went to check his flippered seals. I grabbed him and held on with all my strength, not letting him burst away. He changed shapes at will, like a lion, a serpent, a leopard, a great boar, a tree blazing. I held on. When he resumed his shape, I questioned him, and he told me all I wished to know. He gave us our way home, and then I asked of my old comrades. Your father, he told me, is detained on an island by the nymph Calypso, weeping for home. They feasted through the night. Meanwhile, back on Ithaca, the suitors gathered together in their madness in front of the halls of Odysseus. A young man walked by. "Does anyone know when Telemachus will be returning? I lent him my ship 2 weeks ago, and I need it back." The suitors were startled. "What? Where did he go? When?" Antinous spoke up. "A bad business, Telemachus going off. Seems the young pup is growing up. Probably looking for news of his father. Give me a ship and 20 men, and we will hide in a nearby cove, and I'll give Telemachus a sea adventure he'll never forget." Now word reached Penelope about the suitor's plan to ambush her son, and her knees buckled, and she swooned and fell back on the bed. But Athena sent a dream to the house, and it slid by the door and comforted her. It put her to sleep, and it spoke, "Lift up your heart, woman, and fear not too much for your son." Now the gods gathered together on sunny Olympus, and Zeus, whose mind is endless, called for his winged messenger Hermes. "Hermes, go to the island of Calypso, and tell the nymph with her soft braided hair to release the man Odysseus and speed him on his way. Say it is our will." Now Hermes bent to time his golden sandals with living wings, and he took his wand and he paced into the air. He shot down to sea level, skimming the swells like a gull that skims the sea looking to dip and catch a bright fish. He flew no higher than the whitecaps. And he came to Calypso's island paradise. He stepped up to the cave of Calypso. He could hear the low singing of her sweet voice as she sat weaving at her loom. In front of the smooth-walled cave were 4 springs bubbling shallow and clear. They ran through garden beds of violets and tender parsley. Ornate birds with stretched wings rested on black poplar trees. Even a god would gaze on such a scene with wonder, and Hermes' heart beat with delight. When he had gazed his fill, he entered the wide cave. Face to face with Calypso, she recognized him, for all the immortal gods know each other on sight. Of the man Odysseus he saw nothing. "Hermes, friend, giant killer," she said, "what brings you to my island? It has been too long." "Zeus, fair Calypso, issues a stern warning. Release the man Odysseus and speed him on his way." Release him? Release him? She said. You gods, when you fancy a mortal woman for a friend or a lover or companion, we goddesses do not stop you. But when we goddesses desire the same thing from a mortal man, you gods block us at every turn. Release him? It was I who saved him from the wine-dark sea. Why should I release him now? Goddess, the will of Zeus must be obeyed at once, and show more grace about it when you do so. With that, the glittering one left, leaving a trail of sparks in the air hanging in the black cave. She went down to the shore, where she found Odysseus weeping his proud heart out, scanning the horizon for a passing ship. "Oh, unhappy man," she said, "you need grieve no more. I will release you, Odysseus. Come, cut down some high timbers, and we'll build a raft, and we'll fill it with provisions and guide you on your way." "After all these years, goddess," he said, a helping hand, "what trick lies behind this?" "You old sea dog, Odysseus," she said, "this is no trick. This is the will of Zeus himself." "But one thing, after all these years," she said, "do you still desire your home? I could make you a god on this island, Odysseus. If you could see it all, the struggle and the pain you'd face, you would stay here and be immortal with me. Your bride Penelope, am I less beautiful than her? Desirable, interesting, witty, charming? How can she compare with me, a goddess, compared to a mortal woman?" "No, my Penelope would seem like a shade next to you, for she is a mortal woman, and she ages, and you are an immortal goddess. Yet each day I long for home, and if a god has somehow marked me for something, my tough old hide can take it. Let the trial come." Well, she handed him an axe, and when he was done 20 trees were down. He built a small craft, and she stocked it with provisions. Then Calypso sent him to sea, conjuring a warm breeze to shake out the sail. Now Poseidon, the god of earthquakes, came storming home, and he spotted Odysseus. "Why, here's a pretty little cruise. Seems the gods have changed their mind about Odysseus, but I can still give him a rough ride in." Now, slamming the clouds together, Poseidon raised a mighty storm. He sent a great wave at Odysseus. With a toppling crest, across the water, the boat careened like a tumbleweed or a child's toy. Odysseus looked up. His knees grew slack, and his heart sickened within him. "Oh, rag of a man, I am going down for sure now." But a sea goddess, Ino, saw him, and she spoke. "Odysseus, you seem clear-headed still. Shed that heavy cloak and swim for it. Take my sash and wrap it around you. When you arrive on dry land, toss it back into the ocean." Now Poseidon heaved a wave against Odysseus as high as the roof trees and of awful gloom. The boat timbers flew apart. Odysseus was plunged headfirst into the sea. 2 days and 2 nights he drifted, awaiting death. The third day it broke clear over a windless sea, and he caught a glimpse of land. Now a wave took him straight towards a rock, and Athena instructed him. He grasped it and held, his skin aching and sticking like tiny stones. He groaned with each breaker. Now he had the gift of self-possession from Athena. He scanned the shore and saw a calm river emptying, and he swam for it. "Oh, hear me, lord of the stream," he said, and the river god quieted the waters and allowed him to drift ashore. Swollen from head to toe and scarcely drawing breath, he lay there. He tossed back the veil, and he found twin bushes near the river, and he made a simple bed of leaves where he hid himself, and Athena came down, and she showered a sweet sleep on his eyes, and gently put him to sleep.